the global pandemic couldn't stop them. So I would like to express my gratitude and say thank you once again. If you're new and if you just tuned in and you don't know, this is a third masterclass of the series, and today's guest is highly anticipated filmmaker Nino Kirtadze, who was graceful enough to join us via Zoom. For those of you who might not know, I would just like to say just a little bit about her work. And I'm sure there's not a lot of you who don't know who Nino is, but let me just tell you a brief introduction. So she's a filmmaker, of course. She's a journalist. She's an actress. She's a producer, a screenwriter, an editor. She's a representative of Georgia in Yirmaj. She collaborates on regular basis with international and national organizations as a jury, a consultant, a mentor, a tutor. I don't know, she's a member of the French Writers and Directors Society, and she's a member of the European Film Academy, and she has worked as a war correspondent, nonetheless. 30 years ago, when there was a war in Chechnya. So there's you could think of, Nino has done it. She has dabbled in all of it. She has the greatest experience. And if you don't know, I'm sure I know her from playing the lead role in Nana Georgiadze's films, Chef in Love. That was screened at Cannes and it was nominated for an Oscar. So films have won all the awards there are, all the prestigious awards, and worldwide, including World Cinema Best Director Prize at Sundance. She has also won a European Film Academy Best Documentary Prize. I mean, I could talk about her for hours on end. I could just talk for an hour, and but she won't let me, and it's I think what she has to say is way more important than what I have to say about her. So I would like to give her the floor and Zoom window. But before I do that, I will just tell you a quick disclaimer that the masterclass is interactive. You can ask your questions, any questions that you might have towards Nino. You can text us down below. It's a Q&A message box. Just click on it, write your question. I will do my best to read your question to Nino, and she will do her best to answer it. We don't have a lot of time. She's a great person to talk to. So let's give her the floor. Nino, please take it away.
Thank you very much, very, very much. And thank you for excellent presentation. It feels so nice after hearing all that. And I feel much more strong and important. And it's a fantastic psychotherapy for me. Thank you for the festival to giving me this great opportunity. I am really honored to participate in this online masterclasses along with all these very, very important directors who are participating. It's really great. And it's even more precious for me because I'm far away from Georgia. It has been 20 years or more than this that I'm living in France, but my roots are there and will always be there. So I'm very happy to be here. Now, as the topic of our masterclass is fact and fiction and this fine line that lies between fact and fiction in documentary filmmaking, what does it mean? I will start to share with you my experience and my thoughts, and please feel free to ask questions and stop me, and let's get best of what we can do out of this online conversation. So if we think, many times you may be heard that documentary is about reality, or that documentary director is in a way recording reality and observing reality, and that's what he or she is presenting in documentary film. And I want to bring here the question that bothered me straight from the beginning when I start to make my films. What do we mean when we say a reality? What is it, this incredibly difficult to understand, something that is very difficult to apprehend and understand? What do we understand when we hear reality? And is it trustful? And what is the position of a director in documentary who is facing this reality? And if you ask me, reality is a very dangerous subject. And I don't think that reality is something that you just can look and then film, and then it makes any kind of good documentary thing. And that's why, you know, when once the question was asked to, I think it was Michelangelo, how he makes his beautiful sculptures, he said, you know, I just take the stone and then I take out what is unnecessary in order to see the statue, as if the statue was already in the stone, but for some reason it was just visible, the potential of it just was visible to him. And it's very interesting because something of the sort is happening also when one sets out for the journey of documentary filmmaking. Understanding reality, apprehending it, and framing it literally, it already means a choice. It already means a take on reality. So in my opinion, anyway, we can only talk about some kind of condensed image of reality, some kind of upgraded reality, which is in the film, that of course is constructed and directed by a director. It doesn't mean that it's not true. And I have to use this very beautiful quote about which I sometimes think, and very often this last time, it's Godard who said that the cinema is a series of lies in order to capture the truth. And this truth, capturing this truth, is in every documentary. This is our main goal and main attempt, and sometimes we succeed and sometimes we don't succeed. And you know, when I hear observational documentary, okay, it's like an expression that it entered the documentary cinema world. There is an observation and observation. You know, there is an observation in order to understand what lies underneath this cover of reality, how the truth can unfold itself, and what sometimes the director needs to do or needs to invent in order to make it happen in front of the camera. In relation of what is fiction and what is documentary and how they relate to each other and how they use each other's tools, it's also very interesting to think, because today, more and more often we see in documentary, either we use an actor, either we use a complete, you know, reenactment or reproducing some images that cannot exist in reality. And at the beginning, I witnessed it because I myself also did something like that, named Don't Breathe. In France, it was really, you know, strange. People were saying, oh, what the hell she's doing? What does it mean? In other countries, it was better received because you always, I think, the notion of reality and the fidelity to the reality sometimes forbids this idea, sometimes forbids to see a little bit further and to understand a little bit more what is it that documentary director and in general director means. And for my great joy, there are more and more festivals that don't even make, when you have competition, you have documentary films, very high quality documentary films, and you have also fiction films, and they are both in competition. And I think that I think that the future of our future is that we will talk about fiction and non-fiction films, because we are using exactly the same tools like fiction cinema. And fiction cinema, I have to say, having acted in some films, also very much is using the tools of documentary. I mean, for instance, if I recall the Pialas cinema or Abbas Kiarostami's cinema, or Ken Loach, how he works. If you work with him, you don't even know what is going to happen to you. And I couldn't believe this at the time. And I remember it was the screening of the film. It was during European Film Awards. And it was a film named Looking for Eric. And there were two scenes that I couldn't believe that anybody on the earth can act it like it was acted, because in one scene you could feel a real fear. The police breaks in and there is a family having breakfast, but the reaction of the family when they saw this police breaking in was absolutely extraordinary. And this is what I think Godard means when he says truth. So, and it's even more difficult sometimes in fiction films to get to this truth, even having a very good professional actors. So I went out for smoke after the ceremony, and there was this main actor. And we started to talk, and of course I used this opportunity to ask him whether it is really true, whether he knew what was going to happen and how the acting happened. And he actually said that he had no clue, first of all, that he was playing the main role. Secondly, he had no idea that the dogs will come in and the dog will be at this distance of his face. So of course, it was this huge insecurity that he felt. And of course, on the image, you have this amazing reaction that it's very difficult to play fear. It's very difficult not to fall in some kind of very cheap reproduction of emotion. And cinema and the image is, of course, the emotion, the atmospheric feel of the sequence and the energy of the sequence, in both, by the way, in documentary and in fiction. So this is the very clever take on how documentary feeds fiction and fiction feeds documentary. And how the both contribute to each other's field in order to make cinema. Because like in fiction, when we choose the character, we ask ourselves, we ask exactly the same questions like in feature film, whether casting-wise it can stand, whether this character can hold the film, whether his character can make viewer follow him, get interested in him. So when we frame something, or when we choose which sequence to film and how, in what kind of lighting, even if you don't use the lighting, whether it should be in the morning or whether it should be a group scene, procedure is exactly the same, not even talking about the editing. So my question, again, coming back to this take on documentary purists, how we can talk about something that is very close to the reality when you have all these tools related to the choices, whether it's framing wise, whether it's rhythm wise, whether it's editing wise, especially editing, without which nothing exists when we are talking about documentary filmmaking. So, this is something that helps also a director to, you know, invent new challenges, invent how you can push the acceptable borders, staying in non-fiction film, but making the best of shooting wise, editing wise, using sound mix, or all kinds of tools in order to make cinema. And the aim of documentary and the fiction as well is, of course, cinema. So this is just to define the very introduction of how, at least in my opinion, can I see what is a director, where the fine line lies, and how we can proceed according to our taste, our desire, when we decide to make a documentary film. I can, you know, there are different moments of preparing also the shooting. And, you know, around me, there are many directors who would set on the journey without really knowing what will come up. You know, Frederick Weisman shoots like this. He thinks that it's a great moment when you don't know what is exactly to come, and you have a very broad idea of what is it, where you want to go, and then more you do and more you film and more you enter under the surface of the reality, more you discover characters, the story, and that's how the film shapes up. And of course, each director has its own keys, how to deal with the reality. If I can think about some examples in my past, I've done both because of sometimes it was related to the story, sometimes it was related to the time frame, sometimes for some surprises, because unlike fiction, documentary has many moments where everything is improvised or things change radically, and you cannot control everything like in fiction. But so there was one of the films, and I will try, if I succeed, to show you one of the examples to say how fiction and non-fiction tools can come together in documentary. It was the story where the main character, it's a documentary, and it's called Tell My Friends That I'm Dead. The main character has to be a dead man, real dead man. And I will always regret that there is no trace of how I was doing this research in the Western Georgia, near the Black Sea. This region is famous for these burial ceremonies. Very creative, so creative that you are on the edge of fiction. And I came across some moments that none of the bravest scriptwriter would dare to invent. Really incredible. And this playfulness towards death was absolutely amazing for me to discover. Even though I thought I knew what was going on, but when I went for location scout for Recce, I discovered unbelievable treasures in terms of what the imagination can do, especially dealing with such a subject as death. And so I used to work with international crew. My cameraman was Polish, my sound engineer was Irish. So during my research, I would communicate whatever I found and my ideas with them, which became a big, how to say, kind of a script. That it was kind of an exploration of everything that this region could offer. And I will try even to show it to you, because it's with the photos, very detailed. It's in French, but you know, if you see the film and you see what's on that script that I wrote, you see that most of these images are now in the film. And this became a tool, because my problem was, what can I possibly do to make people who are not coming from this culture understand how this functions? I mean, the film was about death, but it's about life rather than death in general, you know. The story is, you know, mourning and saying goodbye to a beloved person. But at the end, you end up by saying, okay, these people are amazing. There is such a strong energy to live that they can transform all these deadly emotions into something quite joyful. And later, actually, there are many fiction films now that are about the same topic, how, you know, it's all in the same frame, and how suddenly mourning can become kind of a concert or something like that, where people find another strength to continue live and believe and move forward. So, and I will try to show what it gives. And now my cameraman, who was at the time, who was an old friend of Krzysztof Kieślowski, decided to use this, what I sent to them by email with his students in Poland, to show how it's possible to work on the set, documentary set, in trying to explore all these variables. My problem also was that the budget, you will laugh, but it was 13,000 euros, that's all. Because I was a beginner at the time. When I went to Arte, they said to me, are you sure that this is what you can film? Because it sounds like completely unbelievable story. Of course, and I wanted the crew that I wanted, that was given to me, but the deal was in 13 days, I had to finish the film. And of course, you can imagine the stress that I was under, including what if nobody dies in this time frame? You know, what will happen if I don't have a main character? So, you know, it was very funny searching for possible main character during the preparation. And of course, I explored all the possibilities of where could I find it. And, you know, very briefly, I can try and show, sorry if I'm not very good at it, so I'll try anyway, up and can you see something or not at all?
If you could push the share screen button, then we will see your screen.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
And now, yeah. So this is coming. So this is everything that I have prepared before the crew arrived, and I send them all this, but just concentrate on photos, because this will give the idea for one of the almost final plan that final sequence that comes in the screen. It's all possible symmetries. You know, look at this, for instance. how living are dealing with death and how those two worlds can possibly meet. This is also one of the sequences in the film, you know, and it's all very detailed, you know, this and the children in the middle of that. You know, this is also, you know, this huge tombstones that looks like a, I don't know, some kind of a gallery. This is like a Jardin de Luxembourg when everybody goes to see their dear deceased. Yeah. And this was done because according to the light, the perception of this kind of tombs change. It tells different things in a different time frame, right? And this, and then this, you know, one is talking on the phone, another one is reading books, another one is, I don't know, playing football, he's preparing his lessons, and inevitably this image comes into your mind that these are two worlds and probably they do communicate. And then there is long sequence about long talks about epitaph, how it goes. I will go to the pictures, how this mourning ceremony can go, you know, in order to, and how at the same time we can do the dresses for marriage and the dresses for burials, and they are both hanging at the same time in the same space. So here, you know, and I filmed in this place. It's a very, very beautiful place, you know, this very cinematographic as well. And when this is the same kind of stuff, you know, they will bring children, and there are also photos for the deceased that are from their holidays or from their life that will find their place here. You know, it's a tombstone, and this will be their final look to the world of the living. Anyway, and now, so that's a television, how it is involved, and you know, this is like, I don't know, some sort of a Godfather sequence, you know, these guys dressed like that. It's huge. It's a very beautiful cemetery. And yeah, this is how it looks. And I remember when I sent this photo to my camera person, he said, that's where I understood what this film was all about. It's incredible. It's like a living people, like everybody is watching you, and everybody, you think that it's almost some kind of unseen communication. You know, you see this, it's incredibly well crafted. It's like a Louvre in a way, because, you know, you see it's kind of an art that you can witness, and there are these kind of things and so on and so forth. So I will come back to you now. Is it working? My God, incredible. So all these, of course, coming back to, you know, observing the reality and preparing yourself to observe it or to master it or to do something with it. If I were not to go beforehand, of course, I would be incapable of imagining, first of all, what kind of material do we need in order to film it? Because handheld, that would never work in for this last sequence that you're going to see, or almost last sequence. And also to decide how, at some point in the film, you will see that the point switches. At the beginning, we are with living, with their grief, how they overcome this grief, how they fantasize about what this another world can be. And at some point, you switch to another side and you are with deaths, observing the living. And it's very, very strange. And I remember when we screened it in France, I mean, it was inner screening with commissioning editors, the reaction that it provoked. But of course, you can say, I mean, it's completely fictional tool that was used, but nevertheless, it's a total 100% documentary. This is what I mean when I say about the place of a director, about the look of a director and the take on that he or she might have, because that makes a difference. We director, our job is only that, to assume our choices, have them and stick with them, because, you know, we need cameramen to film, we need editor to edit, but this is really our main job. So now you can, you can see what was the up. Okay. Can you see this?
Yes, we can clearly see it.
ყოფთ შემოხვიდეთ აქ ჩემს საფლავს. სურს ნაცნობებთან უცნობებმაც გამოსმით მალე. თუმცა პატარწოდ გამომაწვა მშობელო დედა. მის მართლად ჩამეკონაცით სამა.
Sadami vela shauma dar shaumi shmarfuna skeno shmaleta zamsta obibon shmatsio.
შემოშვილება. თქვენი დარდი მკლავს ასე უდროოთ რო დაგაობთ. სურს მოგეფეროთ, ხმა მოგაწვდენოთ, მაგრამ ზიგუდე მამიკრაბი. მე მე-18 გაზაფხულს ჩამეტყდა კიბეს სიცოცხლე. ხედავ ტირილით დაღალოს და საფლავი და ვიწლი. და შესკვლევებში ვიწელი. როგორც ობოლი ვარსკვლავი.
Okay, am I back?
You're back.
Okay. Good. So I don't know whether there are any questions that we can, take, or I continue.
I think your masterclass is so interesting that people are just listening to you. So continue, and if there are any questions, I will.
Okay, so this is one of the most, I think it's one of the most clear examples of mixture of tools and how we can use it. It's completely fictional. Of course, tools don't talk. Of course, you know, it was recorded aside. And by the way, one of the characters is my poor father who was sitting in the dark and I was holding his hand. It's completely, you know, you just, you know, in order to, but what is written, I was constantly taking photos of these very beautiful epitaphs because they are also written in a certain way. There is a special person who writes them. And all this, when I was talking earlier on upgraded reality or condensed reality, this is exactly a try how you can proceed it, how you can, you know, work with it, what you can do with that, and how you can, what you felt and what you sensed and what you experienced and what you saw as a director can then go into the body of the film and how it could be filmed. Because of course, it's not by chance that we had a dolly. It's not by chance suddenly that we had, you know, these reflections. It was all thought through during when I was there alone. And of course, it's not a chance to have this epitaph suddenly, because if I were not to have this idea beforehand, nothing will save me, because I won't have enough tools and enough, even, you know, I won't have a dolly simply, and the shot won't be the same, of course. So, but saying that, I can also understand that there are moments when you are in front of something quite extraordinary and very, very, very quickly you have to react in order to, if it's an important scene, in order to have it. And in order to, I always work with a crew. And so the rapidity of a communication, the bonds that the crew has and with the director is very important when it happens. So, you know, to say that even if some prefer to set on the journey when you don't quite know what is going to happen, and if there are another people, directors who prefer to prepare, whatever happens, you know, you are so alert at the moment of shooting that there is a small door that is open, because if you want to fit in some ideas that you have beforehand, that's a very bad start. But if you want to understand the universe you are in front of, you're facing, and think about how on the earth you can use some devices in order to dig even deeper into this universe, knowing that at any moment there might be a surprise, then be ready to surprise. And coming back to the reality, there is a very dangerous thing that reality has. You know, it's like a wild horse. If you are not a good rider, it might take you there where you don't want to be. You might even fall and not able to ride it, because there is always this game in the documentary that sometimes when I shoot, you physically feel that how to deal with that, how not to fall into trap of reality, because it's very multi-layered, multicolored, all kinds of dimensions. Everything at some stage is interesting. And very often when young directors end up, or sometimes not even young, end up with 500 hours of rushes, you know, it's very, very, very difficult to deal with. It's very difficult to find a focus of what the film is supposed to tell and how we can find the film, because it's like the reality, you know, it's so vast, so undefined, then you might think for years to understand where is your film in these masses of information and masses of hours. So, you know, having some kind of a focus helps, even if you have to change it at some stage. And of course, I mean, it's costly and it needs a really, you know, very strong crew to do it, because it's not only the image, but it's also a sound, which is even sometimes can be more important than image, because it conveys all the atmospheric feel. It conveys what in France people say hors champ, what you don't see, but you feel the presence of it. It complexifies the layers of a sequence, and it can generate completely different feel of the same sequence, of a same image, because it's incredibly important. Also, this is also a job of a director, to pay attention to it beforehand and think what it is, the conception of the sound. Is there any music? Is there any, you know, additional sounds that you might need? For instance, in the last film, nobody can understand that, but I don't want it music, but I wanted some very specific sound, and I was trying to explain this to my sound engineer, and he came up with something which sounds like some sort of atonal music. I don't know, you know, some kind of a Schoenberg or something, and you don't quite know it is composed or how it is done. So when I asked him what the hell was it, because I was quite happy with what he gave to me, he said, oh, it's, you know, it's I went to the very crowded road with cars and everything, and I recorded it and I compressed it. And I don't know what, but the effect is very interesting. So, you know, I love working with a crew, because, and I also, you know, love our discussions with the crew, and these energies that film can accumulate through one and the other, doubts and overcoming doubts and problems. All this helps in a way to give a shape to what you wanted. And I love when people disagree, because I have to prove also to myself that I'm right. And I have to also give them the proof why on the earth they have to walk 4 kilometers in the mud, not even knowing what the hell we're going to find. And you know, it solidifies the take on when you are subjected to doubts. And there is another thing also that I would like to say, that there are stages in documentary filmmaking, according to me. And unlike in fiction, when each time frame corresponds to one very well defined stage of filmmaking, whether it's pre-production, whether it's recce, and we just think about it. Then we go to location scout, then we choose the characters. In documentary, normally, it's better to be ahead. Basically, when you are trying to write, you are imagining yourself filming. When you are filming, you're trying to imagine where it goes, you're editing, so that you don't find yourself with something that you think, oh my God, it might happen anyway, but you know, it's good to really think about the whole and think where this sequence goes and whether you need a contrast with that in order to pull the dramaturgy and make out of it some kind of storytelling tool that moves the narration forward, or whether it's too much, so you need some different kind of atmospherically it's not enough probably, or more probably it's too much, so you might need a different atmosphere somewhere. And all this helps to prevent bad surprises on editing. And of course, the intuition plays a capital role, because it happened to me already that I didn't see some character. It happened when I was shooting Pipeline, and suddenly appeared the village chief, very thin man, who said, "You didn't even come to ask me, you know, you film here." And he was so nervous telling me how these people who tried to preserve their land or sell it as for a very, very good price, almost unrealistic, were driving him mad, and his hands were shaking. So it brought another idea. That's what I meant by saying, you know, keep the door open. Don't lock yourself into a wonderful script, even if it's wonderfully scripted. Allow a good dose of a doubt, sometimes, because it helps seeing other elements that might be very, very useful to the construction of the film. What can I say? Yeah. So, for instance, let's take Honeyland, right? Honeyland, it's really, I was so happy because not only it was nominated for Oscars as a best documentary, it was also nominated as a best foreign film. So we're getting there. And I'm a little bit tired, you know, of how to say, it's a little bit sad and I think completely unjust when you see documentary field as a little poor brother of a big cinema. You know, it's not true. And I worked with some people as a camera person who were great fiction film camera and directors, but they were unable to operate in documentary, because when I say that you have to be ahead of things, you have to feel when you're observing or filming the scene, you have to feel the energy where it goes in order to be on the right place when things start to unfold in some very interesting way. So the director is the one who has this responsibility, because if you work with a crew, your camera person will be, you know, with the camera. He sees only what is in the frame. And I remember that we had all kinds of these secret signs so that I would disturb what he does. At the moment, I won't, you know, destroy the sequence that we are filming, but at the same time, he knew that there was something coming from the direction, and he would immediately, you know, it was very funny, but because he would be like that and he would do this and he would understand what I meant by touching him here or here. So no, it is really such a joy to work with the crew, which gives you the confidence and which gives you the energy, and they are tired and you are trying really to get as deeper as it possible to what reality hides. Because for me, reality the truth is not on the surface. It's always like a good treasure. It's buried somewhere, really, you know, you have to dig, you have to deserve it. You have to, you know, be obsessive probably enough in order to touch it. And in the past, one of the probably most clear examples is this film, Durakova, that I made in 2008. It was the most, how to say, difficult shoot, because, you know, already when you shoot the character that you don't like, with whom you don't disagree, and who really, you know, frightens even you a bit. And when you have the responsibility of the crew that trusted you, you know, you are stretched between this protective feelings and also the desire to go deeper and expose yourself to the danger. And I at some stage I thought that there was no film, because what I saw, it was very difficult to get 100% of it. You never get 100%, but at least 50% of it on camera. And again, you know, when I came back and far from that place, and we left really in a very super strange way, because we were all emotionally very exhausted. I can say that what is in the film is probably 10% what was really happening. But when we started to edit, and when some people came in who were probably sometimes not even film professionals, the atmosphere of shooting and what it could tell was the best that we could probably do, because it's again this hors champ, that it's not only what you see, but the presence of something that you do not see, but you feel through the image, made a difference. And you feel this nervousness, this fear that is completely all over the place. You feel this character, and you know, if it was, you know, he was very cinematic, I have to say, and it was something really surprising. In this character, again, we are back to this casting thing, and whether it can work and whether it cannot work. So that was really the atmosphere of the image, because sometimes, you know, there are films that are very much concentrated on words. And I often ask young directors to imagine what this sequence might be like if there were no words, what they would do in order to make me understand what is happening, because of course image matters, word also matters, and the balance between what is said and what is not said, but it's there through the image, is a very important balance to think about. What else can I say about, so yeah, and if I may give some advice, you know, this will be the anticipation of the stage to come is probably something to consider in documentary filmmaking. And many years ago, in 2015, I remember I brought a French cinema school to Cajeti, and we did a masterclass. And there was a story that we saw on the television, that from some village, the statue of Stalin disappeared, fourth time. And one of my students, he said, okay, it's, I would love to make this story. So, and we invented a character. This is an artificial tool that sometimes in the frame of documentary film directing can work as a catalyzing element, like in chemical cabinet. You know, you take one element, you put it in some different elements, and then some process starts. So, you know, you have this village exhausted, they don't want to see any more journalists. It's fourth time this statue disappears, we don't know where it is. And we found a former policeman who quit his job, but he had still his uniform, his gun, his everything. And we sent him to the place of a statue where he was doing a different kind of measurements that had nothing to do with nothing, but it was very spectacular, in order to attract attention. And with attracting attention, we restart talking about whereabouts of the statue. From Stalin, we moved to the nostalgia of order, to how to turn then somehow to ourselves who we are and what our mistakes and our responsibility is, because things are not getting better and why it is like that. And then we ended up by really finding where it was. It was really amazing sequence, because this is what I mean by artificial tools. Sometimes, in order not to sit and scratch your head forever, and it might never happen, sometimes you can invent some kind of catalyzer in order to generate the progression, in order to destabilize the calm, in order to get it moving, you know. I also have done something during the shooting of Pipeline. I came across some big article that was predicting a total environmental catastrophe in this region. And I was in Tbilisi. I took this newspaper with me, and I asked my cameraman just to be ready, put the camera a little bit far away from the character, and I put this newspaper on the table. And it was fabulous. You know, it's so, you know, we again, where we fiction, documentary, we are really using, or we don't use actors, not very often, you know. But in terms of use of tools, if we are talking about cinema and apprehending and understanding and the reality, I think we are not far from each other, not that far as some can imagine.
So we have a couple of questions for you. Thank you so much. It's very interesting what you're saying. I'm hypnotized myself. So could you talk a little bit about the crew? Do you tend to work with the same crew, or is it important for you to find new people, new faces, fresh voices, new ideas? So if you could talk about more on the technical side of the things and elaborate on the crew. Thank you.
Okay. You know, when I think crew is very important, really, because crew is something that can leave you alone. It can happen. And crew is a real test for the director, because there are some people who can say, I mean, unexperienced probably, oh, it's not my fault, it's my DOP who did this. That doesn't work, because unfortunately, as a director, everything, absolutely everything is your responsibility. And you better know this. So finding the common language and making understand your thoughts for the crew is very important. I did many films with the same crew, because in a way for me it's easier. They know my universe, they know what I'm after, they know that it's going to be difficult. And we already have this experience of working together. So it's like, you know, you lose less of a time in searching for the common ground, in searching for the keys, because everything and everybody has its keys and one needs to find them. It was like, you know, Tour de Babel, because Babel in a way, because my cameraman was Polish. His language was Polish, English, and French. English was, of course, better, and Russian. My sound engineer was Irish, and he only spoke English and nothing more. Then, you know, we had a Polish assistant for the cameraman who spoke only Polish and very bad Russian. When I was shooting, tell my friends, Guram Tsibakhashvili, that you all know, who is a fantastic photographer and a friend, he worked with me just like he did it for me. He was speaking Georgian and German. So, you know, it was incredibly complex language environment. And many times people would ask, is it bothering for you that your camera person doesn't speak the language? And actually not. because it's probably even better. Because when people understand language, they start to follow the words and not the expressions, not, you know, not the analyze of the sequence in terms of framing. It's completely different when we understand the language and when we don't understand it. For instance, if some people speak Arabic, I don't understand it, but my attention is concentrated on body language, looks, you know, something that I probably wouldn't follow if I were to follow just the dialogue. Then, you know, and then of course, you know, it's an eternal competition between sound and image. And I think that many people experience that. Who is the most important in the crew? Be careful with that, to divide your attention to one and the other, because both are very important to the film, for the film. And when I change, it's also interesting because it's never the same. So you have to try again to find the key. You might find it, you might think that you find it and might not. But the crew is something that is a great source of joy when everything is working, and it's a great support for the director, because I have to admit that it's quite a lonely job, which is, you have doubts everywhere, you know. I remember myself that before the first screening, I always ask myself, who is going to watch it? What is the story? You know, you're exhausted. It's the end of editing, and then post-production, sound editing, and then you sit in front of your timeline. The last days, it's always like that, and sometimes often I'm alone just to concentrate and watch it again, and you think, oh my God, you know, is it really interesting, or it's just my own interest? Because, you know, it's like a kid in a way. It's such a painful process that you want your kid to be, you know, liked, to be appreciated. You want people to like it. You want people to, I don't know, take it, and you want him to walk and have a life. And this is really very lonely and emotional moment. And of course, the crew is important because, you know, when they are with me when the first screening happens, I'm much more reassured than when I'm alone. And then within a time, you know, the bonds are so strong that it feels like a family. We may not see each other every day, but crew is something really very special, because the intimacy of the crew and the dynamic of the crew is really very important. And also the editor then, because the work with the editor is very interesting as well, because the editing is like a style for the literature or something like that. You know, how long I remember these crazy conversations about 2 frames more or 2 frames less. And sometimes you think that we enter in some kind of wonderland, that, you know, these are such tiny details that are very important, because I believe that good films are always in details, and the precision and the time that is given. Okay, it's your film and you're much more involved, but the others who work with you, you know, that giving you their time and attention, it's very, very precious, I think.
Thank you so much. So on that note, what happens when you watch your footage too long and it's not interesting for you anymore, and how to not lose your feeling for the material? So that's another question about editing, as you were saying. Do you watch your own material? Do you edit your own material? And could you talk about what happens when you watch it for far too long?
It's a very good question. You know, I learned how to edit when I was editing Durakova, because it was not an easy story. You know, you have the stories when, you know, it's one line and everything develops chronologically, and there is more or less some kind of an end. It's very important to think, even during shooting, what is the opening sequence of the film and what possibly in the things that you film can go at the end, and how the message can expand where you go. I learned to edit because sometimes it's very difficult. It takes, you know, your lock is like, you give a little bit Corona example, you're locked in the room. I cannot give in very often. I'm very obsessive when it comes to editing. And the person wants to have a life next to you. So what I was doing, that one day I asked my editor just to give me some ideas, which button is for what. That's how I started to, in order to use the night and propose something that then he can turn into something better. And another thing was that I don't want anybody to tell me that it's not possible, because I hate that, you know. And I thought that, you know, some people think that you shouldn't do it. But if we take the example of Kubrick, he knew everything. He knew everything about camera framing, focal, and everything, you know. He knew everything about editing. If you read, for instance, it's Kurosawa's something like autobiography, it's incredible, because when he studied, he had to know everything about sound, technically also about editing, and one of his masters would give him his footage so that he can practice and edit it by night. Because more you know, more you are mastering it, more you are, I mean, in control, and not only you can always trust, but you know, you do not allow any accidents. You don't, you know, allow something that you just give in because you don't know. You know, it happened to me when I started to my very first film. The cameraman made me believe he was drinking too much. It was not the same one as I had afterwards. And he was making me believe that for some reason, images, because of the temperature, disappear from the camera. You know, and I promised myself that it will never, ever happen to me, ever. So, and of course, you know, this trying in the middle of the night, you know already what you filmed, you were there, then you were breaking your neck because something is not working, you're not satisfied, it's not enough. And of course, you know, first viewing of a rough cut, it's a terrible pain. It's a physically unsustainable pain. You think, okay, it's going to be terrible. It's not at all what I wanted. Nothing works. And then there is kind of a magic in it. Then, you know, it's again the same thing that what you do with the reality. Then you take what's unnecessary. And, you know, from these rushes, and you start seeing something, you know, you start seeing, hearing some melody or some rhythm out of sequences, and you can, you know, can breathe now. And I always do something when it's more or less there. I invite people to watch. They are not necessarily film professionals. But, you know, at some stage, production saw it. Me and my editor, we saw it, and we are both tired. We know too much. And this is, to respond to the question, this is the way to create a new distance, because when there are people around who have never seen the film before, and they don't even know what the film is about, who can have completely different tastes, and you watch your own film with them, already you see new things. Already it creates a distance between you and your material, you and your edit. You suddenly see some, you know, something that is probably too long or probably too short. You're much more attentive to the rhythm. And you note, I always take notes. And then you listen to everybody. You don't have to take everything like as a revelation. And very often when people say, okay, it doesn't work on, I don't know, 1 hour and 10, it doesn't work. Something doesn't work. It usually means that at 40th or 50th minute, something doesn't work. That we, accumulate on 1 hour and 10. So you will start to look what it is and how you can change it. And it is always very good because you have a fresh eye, and by having these people around, your eye is becoming fresher. Your perception is more truthful, and you can see much more than when you are alone. And I strongly advise. I don't advise to listen to everything that is said, because that is another knowledge of a director, what is to take and what is to leave, in order not to, because if you listen to everybody, you will end up by losing your film. And it's a kind of a filter that throughout experience you develop in order to know what is important amongst the things that were said.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Another question is about the process of filming. In what way the relationship with the protagonist changes once you decide to insert fictional elements in their own stories? What is the reaction when you show them the film which contains an upgraded reality? So if you could talk about that a little, because it is different from fiction. Yes, it's not a script. You work with the protagonist that their life change every day. So talk about the relationship.
This is a very important. What kind of bond do you have with your protagonist, even when you don't like him, because trust is a base on documentary film directing. Trust, and the aim of the director also is to build that trust, because I don't know who said that once you agree to be filmed, the power you give to another person who is filming you is immense. Basically, the image, if the person is not quite honest, gives thousands of possibilities of painting the character. And it's again, to go back to the reality. Where is the reality? Because you are always in the reality that, as a director, in the reality that you have decided to talk about. Now, when I have a possibility to prepare and understand the ground and the space and the people who are going to be the characters of my film, that also gives a possibility for them to have time and question my intentions. It was like that during the Tell My Friends and other pipeline, or even during the war. War was very specific because you never knew where you would land. But building this trust and explaining them what is the film, because they have to know. Also to prevent, because what is the reaction of the person, let's say, again, the reality, this treacherous reality. When you arrive and you say, I want to, film you and your life, and the first reaction of any normal, sensible person is to perform. They don't tell you who they are, really. They don't put their guts on the table for you, just like that. It never happens. And they also try to understand who the hell you are. They also look at you and they ask themselves what it is that you want really to do. So, those conversations and the time that you can spend possibly with the characters also help to understand each other, It's not said that even this can guarantee that they will, tell you everything that they have on in their heart. It's up to you through this conversation to understand whom are you talking about. Understand what is the vulnerable side of your characters and think how, if you're interested in it, how you can bring this vulnerable side on surface. For instance, if you're dealing with politicians, you have to think, if you have some kind of, public figures like that in your film, you have to think how and what can be the tool in order to somehow get more or less closer to who they are, to the vulnerable side of them. Or be there in a situation when they're busy with other things rather than you. Or if you're facing that, for instance, when I was doing the film about Chechnya, I was dealing with journalists. Journalist is, who is the journalist? Journalist can sit and talk for 3 hours about the topic that he just heard, and he will, good ones are like that, persuade you that so they know how to talk. This is not at all what I wanted. I wanted the vulnerable side of them. I wanted to have in the film the feel of how the person whose job is war journalism can be overwhelmed or hurt or disturbed by what he has to see day by day, how this affects the person. So, of course, you can say that the first 10 minutes are going directly to the bin, but then you can invent some uncomfortable setting, not to put them in an armchair, but probably put them in some uncomfortable chair, so that this sense of not being, well in your element can help during the talks. And you have to orchestrate also if there is a kind of an interview or something that you want to talk about some subject, and if your interest is to have the reaction, because faces are sometimes like landscapes. They say much more than words. If you're after that, then there is the whole preparation to where to put the person. Should it be in the morning or should it be very late at night? You can pretend that you're busy, that this is the only possibility that you can film them. Something that will, a little bit make this, construct this slightly unsecured environment that will probably allow the emergence of inner insecurity. And of course, the way you speak, the way you ask something, if it's an interview, will also affect the response, of course. So this is all, there is in acting, there is a very interesting moment before even you start to learn your lines. You have to think who the hell this character is, and basically you're doing nothing. You're sitting and thinking probably what kind, it's is Chekhov method, Mikhail Chekhov's method, and you think, okay, what kind of shoes is she wearing? And when she goes to sleep, what she does she, and when she wakes up, what's the first thing that she may do, and what may be in her case, and what kind of nails she has, are they painted or not at all? And you won't do it, you won't use these things, but he calls it active waiting. And it's something like that when you think about the character and how to create a bond with him and how to film him, how to unfold what is really the core of this character. Where are his prejudices? Because everybody has these dark and bright sides, and it's interesting when you have both. That's why I like less these militant films, because it's quite simplified way of dealing. And it's surprising also when it comes out. And also if you have a cameraman, you have to talk about the tries that you are going to do in order to let this fragility or anger or frustration to emerge, so that he's ready and he's not, somewhere else. That when you say this or ask this, or that he should capture this moment on the camera. So that's all thinking. That's why I was saying this active waiting. It's like when in Georgian rituals, when the hunter would go, before he would go for hunting, there was all kind of rituals. They won't eat, they will pray, they get ready to this journey. And you might think that I'm completely mad, but there is something slightly very close to that in documentary filmmaking, because you also need luck. You also need this strange chemistry of different energies, yours and your protagonist, so that something hidden could emerge sometimes. Something intimate, probably, because we're all up to that. Something that we wouldn't even expect, and how you create a condition for that to happen, basically.
Thank you. So with a little bit of psychological mind games and little tricks, you get to see the truth that you've been hunting for, so to speak. I could let you talk for hours, as I've already said, but we have a little bit of time left. Another, and probably the last question that everybody wants to know, is if you're currently working on a new project, and was it hindered by current situation? If you could speak about that.
I'm working on the project, which is a fiction project. I've been working on it since last year. It's not really related to our situation now, to Corona. Is and is not. Because if we think about what did Corona do, people were left in front of their very intimacy, When suddenly in French television they start to say, oh, the marriages are breaking, violence is rocketing, because you have people, the modern life is constructed in a way that you can always run away. You go to work, you travel, you meet other people. So when you're at home symbolizing this very intimate and private space, you don't spend probably that much time at home. And suddenly, world stops and everybody is in front of what people call their intimate space. Their partners, kids, or even alone, you sort of think it's a kind of a mirror of where you are in life so far. And it's very interesting, and it's also very frightening. And because we do everything we can not to face it, and now you're forced to. This is why the Corona situation is very exceptional. And sometimes what we see, it's like seeing your own reflection, and suddenly it might frighten, you see, okay, not that bad, but sometimes you say, oh no, can't be. Is it me? Is it my world? And that's why some people snap and they cannot take it. And in a way, this project that I'm working on, which is really not easy at all, has this kind of touch that there is someone who is a good man, so-called honest, or in his opinion, honest and straightforward and trustworthy, and he does horrible things. And always through, he tries to justify himself and escape of the responsibility of seeing it. So, you know, it's a big game between light and dark in a human being, an impossibility to facing your own self and taking the responsibility that sometimes many people do in a different level, of course. And in a way, you know, this even visually, it really, you know, oscillates between bright and dark. So this is what I'm trying to do now.
Thank you so much for sharing that. But how can you work under the circumstances that we're living now, the global pandemic? So do you work on the project alone right now, or do you have collaborators that you shoot your ideas back and forth and maybe talk about and discuss them? What stage are you on right now?
So the first lockdown, to say, in the beginning of spring, it was horrible because I was working alone, and somebody asked this question: "What do you do when you're too close to your material?" Actually, it's not just only for editing, but it's also for writing material. You know, your character, even though it's a maddening process, and I would write. And it was the moment when it was shocking experience, this first lockdown. I've never seen anything of the sort in my life before. And, you know, on surface, everything is peaceful, but nobody is in the street. Everything, it looks like a very, very strange symmetry of everything. And in a perspective, many things were losing the purpose. You know, I was thinking, okay, how can I work on? Every night you switch on television, it's even worse. You have this rocketing number of deaths and people abandoned in some houses. To come back to the script, seriously, unfortunately, I sent it to my producer and she called me back asking whether I was okay. So this time we decided to have a scriptwriter on board so that, you know, I'm not locked in this weird space without any possible distance with my own script. So now we're working together and hopefully we will get somewhere, because it's true that distance is a terrible thing, you know. Without the distance, you can go mad. I think there was one painter, I think it was Poussin, if I'm right, who at some moment started to paint the work of his life. He was locked in, not letting anybody go, and I think he died in some sort of a weird madness. And when people entered, they saw these incredible lines. It was very difficult to understand what he wanted to do. And at the very end of this painting, there was a very beautiful little foot of a woman, which was really beautiful. But otherwise, you know, this can happen.
I hope it won't happen, and you're being smart about it. You have a screenwriter right now. Nino, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you so much for being so interesting as always. And I wish you all the luck with your new project. And I hope to see you again physically, either it's on the festival or otherwise. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who was there. Thank you. It was great seeing you, and hope very much that we will meet very soon. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Bye-bye.